Meet Hassan al-Bolkiah, also known as the Sultan of Brunei. He's the ruler of this little-known country in Southeast Asia and one of the richest people on the planet. You see, most billionaires like to keep a low profile for obvious reasons. They never want to flaunt their wealth. But the Sultan of Brunei, he doesn't believe in any of that. In fact, he's one of the craziest spenders that has ever lived. When the Sultan turned 50 years old in 1996, he decided to show everyone just how wealthy he really was by throwing the most expensive birthday party in history. And over the top can't even begin to describe it. First, he started by turning his birthday into a 2-week-long celebration that took place across the entire nation. He literally built an entire stadium just for the occasion. That way, he could invite every powerful person across the world and get them all in one place to celebrate him. And they were more than happy to make their way to Brunei for the legendary celebration. Politicians, royal families, celebrities, they all came together in honor of the Sultan. Even Prince Charles stopped by to see what lengths the Sultan would go through for this foray. In the end, 60,000 people attended the grand finale of his birthday celebration that ended with a performance by Michael Jackson. Yes, the Michael Jackson. The Sultan paid the King of Pop around $17 million to perform not just one, but 3 live shows for his guests and all of Brunei's citizens. He basically turned his 50th birthday into a nationwide holiday that everyone would be talking about for years. After the shows, he invited 3,000 of his closest friends to a lavish dinner filled with expensive champagne, caviar, and yet another private performance by Michael Jackson. The VIPs who managed to get invited to the secret portion of the party even got to go home with a real gold medal as a party favor. When it was all said and done, the Sultan spent $27 million for this giant birthday party. He could have purchased around 90 Ferraris with all that dough, which would still only make up a tiny part of his car collection, considering that he owns 600 Rolls Royces, 450 Ferraris, and 380 Bentleys. $27 million would be an impressive valuation for a major company, and this Sultan just threw it away on a party like it was nothing. But here's the thing, this is not out of the ordinary for him. In fact, he views it as his duty, as his right to spend all the money of his people for fun. Just a few years ago, he became the world's second longest reigning monarch with 50 years in power. And he turned that into just as big of a deal as his 50th birthday. But how? How does he get away with this? Why don't the people revolt against him? Well, if you've noticed, the Sultan of Brunei is very smart about the way he spends his wealth. Sure, he buys everything he could ever possibly dream of wanting, but he also makes sure that he gives his citizens a taste of the fun, like free Michael Jackson concerts and fancy parties. After his multi-million-dollar birthday party, he didn't just treat his guests, he also raised Brunei's civil servant salaries to appease the locals as well. The Sultan and his royal family single-handedly pays for all the social services, like healthcare and education for his citizens. He likes to give his peasants just enough to keep them happy and docile, and for them to view him as their generous savior. But all that good PR and branding came tumbling down in 2019 when the Sultan imposed Islamic Sharia law, and it is intense. Under this new system, if you engage in sexual activities with someone before you're married, you could be sent to prison for up to 7 years and get hit with a ton of fines. If you cheat on your partner, you could be killed by the government. If you participate in gay activities, you could also be sentenced to death. And the death penalty is also on the table for anyone who insults the Prophet Muhammad. There are also punishments for participating in any religion other than Islam, and if you dress indecently. So suddenly, Brunei became a country where it was either you follow these rules or face death. But do you think the Sultan follows these strict rules himself? Of course not. In fact, his favorite pastime is having very X-rated violent sex parties filled with stuff that would definitely get us demonetized if we went into it. This Sultan is truly the stuff of evil. So I hope you enjoy me getting banned from yet another country, and welcome to the Trillionaire lifestyle of the Sultan of Brunei. And by the way, if you want to dine like royalty without wasting a ton of money, you gotta check out today's sponsor, CookUnity. CookUnity is the most convenient way to get a wide variety of restaurant quality food from award-winning chefs delivered right to your doorstep. I've tried a lot of meal delivery services out there, and they all taste like a slightly better microwavable meal. But with CookUnity, it actually tastes like real quality food and is surprisingly affordable. Like this grilled ribeye steak from LA-based chef Dustin Taylor. This is one of my favorites from CookUnity, just a simple ribeye dish like you would get at a restaurant. Or take this adobo flat iron steak with za'atar rainbow and fingerling potatoes. This one is by Chef Anat and is super flavorful, a little spicy, and I might have even liked it a little bit better than the ribeye. So I basically got to eat 2 restaurant quality meals for not even the cost of just one fancy dinner. And as you can see, I have an addiction to steak, but they have over 350 other diverse dishes to try out as well. They're all just as good and their menus are updated weekly. You can select the meals yourself with all their filters, or you can let CookUnity pick them out for you based on your preferences. You can pause your subscription, skip weeks, or cancel at any time, so if you want to enjoy restaurant quality meals without breaking the bank, Go to cookuni.com/jtrend50 or click the link below and use my code JTREND50 to get 50% off your first order so that you can try it out for yourself. The Bokya family has been ruling over the tiny territory of Brunei for over 600 years. They've been ruling twice as long as the US has been alive, and it's made the bloodline extremely wealthy. But Brunei is a tiny country. It's located on the northern coast of an island called Borneo in Southeast Asia. It's one of the smallest countries in the world, with only 500,000 people living there. That's less than half the population of the city of Austin in Texas. So where did all this money come from? See, while Brunei never had a lot of land or people, it did have an insane amount of one very precious thing: oil. When the earliest generations of the Bokya family took over Brunei, they probably had no idea just how valuable this little plot of land was. And up until its oil and natural gas reserves were discovered in the early 20th century, the nation was actually pretty broke. But finding that pot of gold buried underneath Brunei changed everything. Practically overnight, oil and gas became 99% of Brunei's exports and boosted the economy to new heights. In the blink of an eye, Brunei went from a struggling poor country to one of the richest ones on the planet for its size. But guess where every last cent of that oil money was going? That's right, straight into the pockets of the royal family. Even though the territory was technically a British protectorate, this royal family was still collecting insane amounts of wealth from this newfound discovery. By the time Hassan al-Bolkiah, the current sultan, was born in 1946, his family was already well established into the upper echelon of society. But over the course of his reign as sultan, he would manage to snowball the family's money and power even more. Between the 70s and the 80s, the United Kingdom lost its hold over Brunei, just as the oil industry was blowing up when Shell started pumping for oil in the country. And in 1984, Brunei officially became its own independent nation, which gave the Sultan the freedom to make as much money as he wanted without the UK watching over his shoulder all the time. This took things to the next level, and he was not shy about flaunting his new extravagant lifestyle. So you're the Sultan of Brunei and you have access to unlimited money. No matter how much stuff you buy, you will always have more cash. So what do? Well, you spend it, obviously.
When you don't work for your money, how can you value it? Like if it just comes right out the ground, like how do you really think $10,000?
Bro, that dude is spending, how much was he spending a day?
So I was into the math,
That's so crazy. He lives in a palace with 1,788 rooms, 257 bathrooms, 5 swimming pools, a mosque, a banquet hall that holds 5,000 people, and a 110-car garage.
You see, when you have that much cash at your disposal, it becomes a game of if you're able to spend it all. So first you get a house, or rather a $1.4 billion palace. But palace doesn't really begin to describe it. It covers 49 acres worth of space. That's double the size of Chicago's Millennium Park, the place with the giant bean sculpture. The palace has 1,788 rooms. Yes, 1,788 rooms, which is almost as many rooms as the largest hotel in all of New York, the New York Marriott Marquis, which is an actual skyscraper. This makes the Sultan's palace the largest residential palace in the world to this day. And to really show off how loaded you are, you top off the palace with a dome made out of 22 karat gold. 24 karat gold means that it's pure gold, so 22 carats means that that dome is 92% gold. If he could have made it 100% gold, I'm sure he would have, but it probably wouldn't have been strong enough. And you make sure to equip the property with everything you might ever need. There are 257 bathrooms, a banquet hall that hosts up to 5,000 guests, a mosque, 5 swimming pools, an air-conditioned stable for your 200 polo ponies, not to mention that this is just one of your 150 homes across 12 different countries. But this palace you called home also has a specifically designed feature that nobody would ever have except you: a garage that holds up to 110 cars. Anyone would get their dream car if they're rich enough, but that was not enough for you. You wanted 100 copies of every luxury car on the markets. You built up a collection of nearly 9,000 vehicles that are all worth around $5 billion in total. Many of them are super rare too, like your gold-plated Rolls Royce that you had designed with an open roof for your umbrella. And if you ever want to travel anywhere, well, you have to go in style. So you invested another few pennies into your own private jets. But you can't get a little base model PJ like the other lowly millionaires. No, you have to make sure you got the biggest, fanciest private jet in the world, an entire Boeing 747. In your Boeing 747, you have a sink that's made out of solid gold, which alone costs $120 million. And you don't just treat yourself either. You allegedly even gave your daughter her own private plane as a birthday present as well. And that's on top of the 17 airplanes you own in total. But planes, cars, nice houses, that is nothing. Tons of other billionaires have those things. You gotta be more creative than that. So you build your own private zoo with flamingos and falcons that can do tricks like riding bicycles and singing. It also had around 30 Bengal tigers living there. And you're not the only big spender in your family. Your brother Jeffrey also blew through billions of dollars like it was nothing.
2001, Jeffrey was forced to auction off his personal possessions after using the country as a piggy bank, spending an average of $747,000 a day for 10 years, on top of the $17 billion in gifts to friends and family.
Your list of family possessions is absolutely insane at this point. Your family owns a luxury hotel chain, the jeweler that supplies jewelry to the royal family of England, 10 luxury watches that cost $8 million, hundreds of thousands of Versace and Armani suits, a golf course designed by professional golfer Jack Nicklaus, a professional lab for developing film, and literally just 16,000 tons of marble sitting in a warehouse somewhere. As one of your family's former advisors explained, with their money they could have cured diseases, but they have little interest in the rest of humanity. So what are they interested in? Well, sex parties. Dirty, raunchy, violent sex parties that are definitely not haram. Spending money on fancy stuff is great, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. Because the thing they really love spending their riches on is sex. And not just sex with any ordinary girl either. No, when you have that kind of money, you can buy any girl you want, and I really do mean any girl, have them come over to your palace, and then you can do whatever you want to them.
And so he had his own nightclub.
Okay.
And so what he would do is he would pay actresses, he would find these girls, get me her, and he would get these gals and give them exorbitant amounts of money to come. And then he would have a nightclub where it was only him. And he would go down there and it's filled with gorgeous women. And he would go down there and just go, you, come with me. And then they'd go f***ing party. And they were making a lot of money.
For years, the Sultan of Brunei and his brother Jeffrey lured women to their country to do unspeakable things to them. And yeah, definitely too unspeakable for YouTube. And throughout the years, there's only been a few times where people tried to expose what they're actually into. Like in 1997, when former Miss USA Shannon McCarthy tried to sue the Sultan and Jeffrey for what they did to her. She said that the two royal brothers held her hostage and turned her into their sexual toy. Shannon says she was sent to the palace by an agency called Caliber Talent Consultants and was told that she would be getting paid $3,000 a day for modeling gigs and promotional appearances. But on the first day that she got there, it became very clear that their intentions for her were much more sinister. When she realized that they were planning on paying her for sex, she tried to leave but they wouldn't let her. Instead, they turned their palace into a prison and made her into their slave. Every evening, she was forced to dance at parties and do things with the people the Sultan told her to do it with. One of the men told her one night, quote, "What do you think you're here for? You might have been Miss USA, but you're a whore now." When she wasn't forced to do horrible things, she was shown movies of prostitutes being killed to really keep her scared. They held her there like that for over a month until one day they randomly came into her room, threw her passport at her along with a return ticket to the US, and said she had 20 minutes to get ready and leave. The experience left her with, quote, mental anguish, nightmares, difficulty sleeping, other trauma, and she wanted $10 million in reparations for the ordeal. A small price to pay for the Sultan of Brunei. But a judge ruled that because the Sultan was a foreign head of state, he was protected by sovereign immunity from US laws. So the case was dropped just like that. The Sultan and his country are just too politically important to the US, so the US just couldn't afford to go up against them. As a lawyer for the State Department explained in court documents, quote, permitting this action to proceed against the Sultan of Brunei would be incompatible with the US's foreign policy interests, end quotes. This man is untouchable. He could lure anyone he wanted into his palace, do whatever he wanted to them, and nobody could do a thing to stop him. And maybe all his money and power could save him from being prosecuted in an official court of law, but here's the thing, no one is immune from the court of public opinion. August 2010, a book hits the shelves that exposes everything the Sultan and his family were doing at their secret sex parties. It was written by a woman named Lauren Gillian, who says she spent time at the Sultan's parties from 1992 to 1995. And unlike the former Miss USA, she says she knew that she was going to be the call girl for Prince Jeffrey, but things got dark fast.
And one of them was writing a book. And so she had a laptop and she was like documenting all, they confiscated her laptop, and then she went back to America, that she spilled the beans and she ratted out all the other girls that were doing it, and it kind of fucked up the whole thing.
Lauren claimed that Jeffrey would just pick girls that he wanted to be sent over to Brunei. Quote, he started opening magazines and say, "I want that woman, I want that one," and order them, end quotes. Many of the girls he requested were as young as 15 years old. Quote, "There's no such thing as underage over there," end quotes. Every night they were given expensive liquor at the Sultan's clubs in order to dance for all his friends. Then some of the girls would be picked to do more things in private. And during the day, Lauren was left to rot in the Sultan's extravagant palace. But it wasn't as glamorous as it sounds. Quote, there were no books, no magazines, no television. I walked in circles, I sat back down, I looked for a bathroom, I tried the door and it was locked. I considered peeing in a wastebasket. I was trembling from the cold, from hunger, from nerves, end quotes. And after hours and hours of being left alone with nothing, Jeffrey or the Sultan would finally come in and do stuff to her. This book finally exposed just how evil this royal family was. And while the royal family gets to live out every dark fantasy they have, the rest of the peasants face death for much, much less. The average person in Brunei can easily be sent to prison for years or even be sentenced to death by stoning just for having sex under the country's Sharia law.
He's courted by America's most powerful leaders.
These visits give me a good opportunity to renew the long-standing and warm friendship.
That friendship is being strained as Brunei installs a new Islamic Sharia law that punishes adultery, abortions, and same-sex relationships with flogging and stoning.
But the Sultan and his family, they were free to source girls from other countries, lock them up in their palace, and throw massive sex parties without any punishments. And the people there are not being quiet about this hypocrisy.
Nobody is gonna set foot in that damn hotel until he is out of it.
He is the Sultan, and Hollywood protesters like Jay Leno want the Sultan's money out of the storied Beverly Hills Hotel. The hotel chain, called the Dorchester Collection, is partially owned by a Brunei investment agency. Hurt the investment, hurt the Sultan. Richard Branson tweeted, "No Virgin employee will stay at Dorchester hotels until the Sultan abides by basic human rights."
It's people being stoned to death. Hello? It's all economic. You know, how big an economic impact will it have? Let's find out and see. It's just a matter of doing the right thing.
They're some of the world's most exclusive hotels, 9 of them owned by one of the richest men in the world, the Sultan of Brunei. Effective today, his repressive government is calling for gay sex and adultery to be punishable by death. The move has been condemned by the U.S. State Department and the UN Secretary General. But actor George Clooney is taking aim at the Sultan's $20 billion fortune, calling for a boycott. He writes, "We're putting money directly into the pockets of men who choose to stone and whip to death their own citizens for being gay." Ellen and Elton John headlined the list of those boycotting the hotels.
The Sultan lived in stark contrast to his stated beliefs.
But it's hard to protest over there, because in Brunei, the Sultan controls all the media. Only 60% of the population in Brunei even has access to the internet, and the people who do have it are only given super strict access that's hyper-monitored by the government. Journalists in the country can face up to 3 years in jail for reporting on stuff the Sultan doesn't like. The government has the power to shut down any media outlet in the country anytime it wants, and any criticism of the royal family of Brunei is considered a criminal offense. So once again, another country I'll never be able to visit. Online, you'll see the Sultan has a net worth of a measly $30 billion. But if you watch this channel, you know by now that online net worth estimates are a farce. Because the name of the game when you're a billionaire is to hide as much of your money as possible, even if you're the Sultan. And there are a few reasons for this. Number 1, you can appease the public and say, look, I'm not that rich. Number 2, worst case scenario, if something happens to you and they seize your assets, well, you'll still have billions or potentially hundreds of billions of dollars hiding offshore. And the way you do this is typically through your family members and other people you completely trust. For the Sultan of Brunei, he probably keeps most of his actual wealth through a web of shell companies and trusts all around the world that all have his family members listed as owners or just completely fake people listed as owners. That way, if someone were to try to seize one of his bank accounts, they'd have to go to this little remote island and talk to a bureaucrat there. A few months later, they get a reply, but then they say this company is owned by a trust in Belize. So you go to Belize, a few months later, you get a reply, oh, this trust is owned by a company in Vanuatu. And the chase just goes on. And with them controlling the entire country's economy, 1.3 billion barrels of oil, and all the wealth they've accumulated over the years, this royal family has got to be worth at least a few $100 billion, if not maybe $1 trillion accounting for interest and growth. And yes, there are secret trillionaire families out there. And when you have something like $1 trillion, why would you not institute strict laws to keep the masses down? Why would you not put a boot over their neck? You don't want them thinking for themselves, do you? You gotta do everything in your power to make sure your reign continues.